The Creative Association of Curators. This is what Anna Bitkina has been working with as an independent curator, director, and co-founder. This is an art organization, and I quote, "They conduct interdisciplinary projects in the fields of contemporary art, design, and social sciences." So please, Anna, the stage is yours.
Hello, everyone. It's I didn't expect such a great big audience in the morning, but it's wonderful. I'm going to set up my alarm because I have to talk like for half an hour. Is that correct? Yes. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, my name is Anna Bitkina, and I'm curator from St. Petersburg, but nowadays I share my time between Netherlands and St. Petersburg, having practices in both places. And I'm co-founder and director of an art organization called the Creative Association of Curators Talk. And it's a curatorial duo. I work together with a colleague of mine who is sociologist. My background is more in the visual arts. So we combine our practices together, and we've been collaborating since early 2010. So we exist already more than 7 years. So the talk is, I'm not going to talk much about our organization, so this is just to introduce you what I came from, and I guess you would be more interested to know about some artistic practices of Russian artists that particularly working in textile, and I guess that's my job here to tell you a few examples about that. But nevertheless, I would like to tell you about talk because it's very important how I sort of came working with artists that are socially and politically engaged, and also work textile as a one of the medium in order to convey their social and political message. So talk is, I guess it's an interesting example of kind of new form of an institution, an nomadic institution, which is a very grassroots and came out of initiative of 2 persons. So we are 2, and we conduct different multidisciplinary projects. And so I guess like our main interest of curatorial interest is research and analysis of remnants of Soviet past in different social spheres in Russia. So we look at public space. We look at analyze the relation between local governance and citizens who meet in public space. We work lately a lot with young people and sort of get into analyzing educational system nowadays, as well as working with different organizations for young people. So for us, so we preoccupied nowadays with an understanding of Russian society now, and also Soviet past, because the capitalism came in a very accelerated way into Russia, and I guess we're still kind of digesting what actually happened and what's going on now. So looking at different social spheres and from a perspective of artistic practice and curatorial practice and practice of social research is helping us to undig different matters and different issues. We're also interested to look, sort of speculate of what's going to happen in Russia in the future. So that's why our young people became a focus of interest recently, because for us as like working, for instance, with a school or with a different organization for young people and interacting with young people, we sort of try to understand their social and political stance in order to sort of project it to what sort of civic position they might have and what kind of political actions that might undertake in the future. And so we're also interested in subject of media. And this interest came from, so we started this research from 2014 when the annexation of Crimea happened and in Russia, and during the escalation of Russian-Ukrainian conflict, the media discourse was changing a lot in Russian media and also in the Western, and media narrative started to very much repeat and remind the Cold War narrative. So we wanted to dig deep into that and look at the strategies, political and media strategies in the past during the Cold War time period, and look at them now, sort of combining it with the development of new technology. Nevertheless, like kind of looking at the repetition of different narratives. So that's, I guess, pretty much about talk at the moment. And I want to sort of, it looks like sort of different things, a lot of different interests, but it's all driven by the kind of major social and political agenda. And being a female collective, we also work a lot with female artists, especially with the kind of new emerging generation of female artists that sort of emerged suddenly after 2012. I guess Pussy Riot maybe being one of the reasons why younger generation of Russian artists, particular like certain group, is kind of very politically aware at the moment. So yeah, and so speaking about that and about different points of interest, I guess we very much try to unpack different issues related to social reality and being on the territory of art. We try to develop different scenarios of kind of possibilities of scenario, how that could be solved, how it could be repaired, how it could be like operate better. I guess I've been invited here by Lise Bjorn, who I met a couple of years ago in Oslo. And I guess she invited me here because she knew about like my curatorial practice and also my experience of working with several artists, Russian artists, they're particularly interested in textile as a medium. For the last few years, I've been working in a close collaboration with artist called Natalia Pershina-Yakimanskaya Glukля, who's also like based between St. Petersburg and Amsterdam for the last 5 years. And so she is, this is a installation view of her project, which she did for the Venice Biennial in 2015 for the main projects. This it's called Clothes for Demonstration Against Falls of Presidential Election of Vladimir Putin, 2011-2015. So this work is inspired very much by the series of marches in the public space in Russia in different cities. In 2011 it started, those series, and they're very much driven of the illegitimate election of Putin on its third term. And so this installation consists of 43 garments or clothes that are constructed from existent and non-existent pieces of garderobes. And these 43 characters within this installation very much represent over inspired by those slogans which the artists were kind of scanning by being part of those demonstrations. And she incorporated this lexic, this narrative, into different parts of presented clothes. And also, those clothes also represent different various representatives of Russian societies. So by putting them on an installation view, she is trying to give them political power and voice, and use clothes as really like political banner or political meaning. So there are different kind of I guess each garment or each clothes deserve a kind of close attention, and how art is working on designing them, and how she creates the character within the within each garment. But so clothes was always important medium for Gluckle's practice. And she used clothes as a sort of a bridge between private and public, between art and everyday life of different individuals. She works a lot with very marginal groups of people and creates, sometimes in a tragic or sometimes in a sort of a humoristic way of different situations when like people of different social group would never meet, and then she creates situation they would meet and then see what happens. So yeah, okay, so I'll speed up a little bit further. So anyways, so she's like design of each garment comes from a real life, but you know, then she goes through, like she redesigned it, she artistically modified it in order to maybe combine several voices in one piece of clothes. And so then, so that's this installation, and she works a lot with sketching and experiment with different materials, with different way of using the text by embroidering, printing on the clothes, and adding different parts, juxtaposing like unusual, incorporating unusual things into clothes. Yeah. So, and then we're moving further. I will maybe in a little bit more detail will tell you about the project, which is an ongoing project called Debates on Division. It's an ongoing performance, which is organized in format of a fictional TV talk show. And different invited individuals are asked to bring a piece of garderobe and tell like the piece of garderobe that has a significant meaning in their lives, and they tell story around this piece of clothes. And through these personal stories, different nuances of a local socio-political context emerging. So this project being traveling in since 2014 till this year, every time it's landing, having this very particular structure, project landing on different social and political contexts, and those individuals that invited to deliver stories, they're of different age, different social groups, different nationalities. So it's like every time the project is different. The content of it is very different and very much apparent for the location where the project landing. So first time we've done this project in St. Petersburg as a part of Manifesta public program. And so here you see, since it's a TV talk show, there is a moderator, and there are stories that are presented. There is also a group of experts invited from different spheres, local artists, philosophers, politicians, writers. So different people who can connect the story with a local context, but also could comment on this in a more more depth and in a more sort of a specific to their profession way. So in this particular like setting, it was in a theater, in a kind of small black box theater. So it was a very sort of a spectacular component in this. And what is also important, that audience is invited to vote for each story. So each everyone in the audience has two dresses, white and red, and they after presented story, and they invited to vote. So whether this piece of garderobe should be part of the Museum of Utopian Clothes, it's a sort of a project that Gluckle is doing already for many years, or it should not. So the debates of division performance is also sort of a proposing a new or rather utopian way of a public institution where every individual could actually place their voices for the piece of the collection. So this is, you see, like how stories are presented. The version of Debates and Division in St. Petersburg was particularly focused on the political conditions of post-Soviet Russia and its relation to post-Soviet Union states. It was especially important to talk about it while the Russian-Ukrainian conflict emerged at that time, and the topic was very hot in June 2014. And there is another component of this performance, which is also like an important part of that. After the performance is over in the theater, everyone is invited to take part in the public procession, where this is pieces of garderobe is taken out from the intimate theater space into public domain, where passers-by and wider audience is invited to sort of join the procession and engage into conversations. The second edition of that, so every time, like we've done it already 4 times. The last one is Oslo in June 2017. I'll tell you a little bit more in a minute about that. So every time the performance is sort of changing because like the local conditions informing the content on the different levels, like depending on what kind of space it is, what kind of budget we have, what kind of stories we collected, what kind of sort of current interest of me as a curator of the project and artists are having at the moment. But of course, it's very much informed of political content in the location in a particular time. So last year we did the second edition of Debates on Division was in Amsterdam, and in 2016, spring 2016, and the subject of new way of migrants was very much discussed in mass media. So we decided to focus that particular edition on these stories of migrants. So there were 3 stories: a story of a black T-shirt, story of sport trousers, and also story of a scarf. So all story was real, and the people who delivered the story, it gave us pieces of their clothes. They were wearing it, crossing borders, of being in a kind of like difficult situation by entering Europe, or in a situation related to some adjustment to the reality where they happen to come. So that was in a white box, or not white cube, sorry, and in a space called SMBA. It was this place doesn't exist any longer, but it was a kind of interesting initiative by Stedelijk Museum, which had a sort of an independent space, a part of their more traditional museum building. So it's closed now after 10 years of operation. So we were one of those last people who had the project over there. So you can see that the conditions of the space also kind of very much reflect on the aesthetics of performance. So then we had the third edition of that we had as a part of Creative Time Summit in 2016. It was in October, and a bit like more than a year ago, and it was a part of the Creative Time Summit in Washington, D.C., and the summit took place in Lincoln Theater, kind of old theater, beginning of 20th century building, old American theater, and the whole content of the or format of Creative Time Summit was more like a TEDx presentation. So like almost 1.5 hour full-length performance, we had to shorten into 20 minutes. So, and that's of course reflected on the format of the performance. And at that time, it was exactly before the presidential election in the States. So we decided to focus on stories related to political crisis in the country. So like delivered story was very much connected on the personal level to what people are going through being confronted by political system. So like we had to sort of improvise in terms of the procession. So we had a procession in a kind of more shortened format because it was impossible to take 1,000 people out of this on the street, like because it would take too long time. yeah, so that's pictures from that, and there is you can see the process of voting. Of course, it looks very spectacular when you know there is a huge audience sitting in front of you, and you kind of feel this kind of how individual voices are emerging in kind of this colorful format. And I guess it was also interesting to see that before the presidential election, when this voting colors and modes of campaigns are like being very present in the country. So in Oslo, we've been invited by RAM Gallery to have a project, have a debating division in Oslo. So Madeline Park invited us after like a couple of years of conversation with Madeline, who wanted to collaborate with me on Russian artists working with textiles. So we decided that probably debates on division format, and Gluklia, who works a lot with textile, would be a right project to bring in or develop in Oslo in a local context. So we did the project in collaboration with Grünerløkka Public Library, which was a kind of unusual also place for us, but an amazing public institution. And it was an interesting experiment how the project would sit in that particular context. And in Oslo, we decided to form the content of the project around the agency of young people in the society, looking at Norway as a sort of a perfect state, right, with its own problems, and to voice those problems through stories of young people. So the whole performance was composed differently. And because we worked with a very fragile material, like with a very personal story of young people, they didn't want to be revealed. So we had to think like how to be honest about it and how to deliver it in the most ethical way. So we decided to so, I mean, the artistic format of that was, of course, decided by Glukla. But so what you see now is a sort of setting of how the person who played the role of a moderator and how the expert, how they were positioned within the library context. And I'm very proud that we had a young person who is actually also commented on stories, and there was very interesting input. So this is an example of one of the costumes which was designed for for one of the stories. There were about like 6 stories presented, and so what we did is during our research period, which was in February this year, the performance was presented in June. So we came and we interviewed several people, young people, between like 14 and 19, I believe. And we asked them to tell us about their fears, about their dreams, about their concerns, about their understanding of themselves in the future. So all this context, all these narratives being artistically modified. And also while talking to them, Gluklia was kind of sketching, doing different kind of like imaginative sketches of visualizing those stories in a way. So, and those sketches became a part of a costume design. So what we did, we sort of modified the stories and ask and invite also a group of young actors to tell the stories being in the costumes on, and we filmed those stories. So we sort of created double layer of protection and a moment of alienation of this as personal stories and told us by young people. So yeah, so this is the story of gray owl head. As you can see, it's a screenshot from the video. Those people weren't present during the performance. So stories were played, video played, and then the costume would appear, like a person would bring it as like you do it an auction, as a sort of a lot, right? So and the audience in the library being invited to vote whether it should be part of the museum of utopian clothes or not. Yeah, this is so like this story particular being focused on this shaming in social media and how like a boyfriend reveals some personal information on the social media of her girlfriend, and this story is told by that girl. So this is black cat costume, and this story is very much connected to the sort of a deviant, abnormal behavior, sexual behavior or thoughts of younger people about their sexuality and way how they deal with their bodies and sex in general. So that story is more connected to consumerism and like consuming not just like clothes but music and different electronic gadget and so on. So that's kind of a depressed teenager costume. And this is a costume of a recent teenager migrant who came to Norway and what he's experiencing. So, and then as a important part of the project, there was a procession in Grünerløkka area, and some of the banners, they were also done together with people who took part in the workshop, which we also conducted by preparing the performance in the library. So, and then, which is kind of unusual part of the project, but since we've been invited by gallery, we wanted to kind of make the project more durational, not just one-day performance, but sort of create from artifacts of the performance and its preparation to compose an exhibition, which was presented in Ram Gallery in the second half of June till, I guess, for a month. And so you can see costume presented there. You can see like little installation with voting dresses. There is a black room which we created, and there you can hear stories of people who like those actors that presented their costumes in during the performance. And also we had some flat screen with documentation of previous actions, previous iterations of debates on division. So I think I've talked for 25 minutes, and I have more information for you, but I don't know whether I should continue or not. But I also would like, after that, I would like to take a couple of questions, because I think the whole format of this kind of small, intimate situation has sort of allowed us to maybe conversate a little bit. I know there will be panel after, but you know, I think it's more sort of interesting to talk about presented material straight away. So I will tell you about one more collective. It's collective of 4 young females. You can see their names in the brackets, and they call themselves Sewing Cooperative Sveme. There are 2 girls over there from Ukraine and 2 persons from St. Petersburg. They used to be all in St. Petersburg, but now this kind of Ukrainian part of the collective moved back to Kiev. And this performance is called 12 Hours Working Day, which they performed for 12 hours in the space of Museum of Contemporary Art Garage in Moscow as a part of this new project of a garage called Triennial of Russian Contemporary Art. So Sveme is very, in their practice, is very much deal with questions of labor policy and global economical conditions and productions. So in this particular performance, they sort of they perform one working day of workers in undeveloped countries that are tailoring, producing clothes for us, which we wear. So 12 working hours a day, and with a 3 15 minutes break, and no conversation, like occasional breaks for toilet, and also like no conversation unless it's connected to a production process. So they created situation of like a sewing workshop when they would produce the same item, but they divided it on different parts. So one person would like sew like one part and another. So in the end, there would be a thing. I don't know what exactly they did in Moscow, but I've seen their performance in St. Petersburg a year earlier, and they were doing those kind of box bags which you put on your vest, like those little things with zipper. I don't know what it's called. So, and then next day they would sell it for the price of a little bit less than 50 cents. That's what people that produce mass production clothes, working for different corporations, are getting for each item which they produce. So that's sort of by this performance, they sort of reconstruct conditions of global economy. So I think I'll stop here now. So you've got few names, few projects, and I guess that's enough for me, coming from I guess different geography and different political conditions. So if you have any questions, let's like couple of questions. That would be, I guess, enough. Yeah.